What's up, my friends, and welcome into the PHLY Phillies Podcast, broadcasting live from the Xfinity Lounge. As always, we're brought to you by our friends over at Bet365, and the postseason continues, not for the Phillies, but for Major League Baseball. It's brought to you by True Market Financial Credit Union. Hello to you, and a happy Monday. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. There was good baseball to be played this weekend. It just obviously didn't happen to be the Phillies. Good news is the Eagles got back on track with what felt like one of Jalen Hurts' best performances of his career. Perfect passer rating, was excellent against the Vikings. 2 TDs for A.J. Brown, touchdown for Devontae Smith. It was a much-needed reprieve from crappy Philly sports over the last couple of weeks. Now, the Flyers have played some good hockey over the last couple of weeks as well, so that's been a boost, including their win on Saturday. So I think we've finally gotten out of the doldrums a little bit of the Phillies being bounced from the postseason, the Eagles' consecutive losses, the Flyers lose their home opener. Now, the game against the Jets was not a particularly good hockey game, but they bounced back in a big way the other night in the win on, what was it, Saturday night. They bounced back in that win against the Wild. So I think we've kind of gotten out of the doldrums a little bit. I think we're starting to be able to shape our conversations towards the offseason, specifically when it comes to the Phillies. And we'll do all of that continuing today. So here's what's coming up on the PHLY Phillies podcast. As always, as we've done over the last 2 weeks now, we'll continue into the offseason. We'll do our Monday morning GM conversation. We'll sit down in our armchairs on Monday morning, now Monday afternoon, and discuss another player who is an impending free agent. Today, as you can see by the thumbnail and the title of the show, we're going to discuss Harrison Bader. We have a couple of mailbag questions to end the season from our people, our friends in our Discord, and you can ask a question as well in the chat. So if you have a last-minute question, whether it be about the Phillies in 2025, the MLB in 2025, or you just want to ask a fun personal question to me or Andrew, you can do that in the chat, and Andrew will clip it for us for our mailbag session as well. And then later in the show, we'll talk about the ALCS Game 7. The Blue Jays stave off elimination last night. They beat the Mariners 6-2, and they head to a Game 7 tonight. The two best words in all of sports, Game 7. And if you have no real rooting interest, as in your team is not playing or your rival is not playing, you get to just sit back and enjoy the game. And tonight's going to be a really fun one because everybody should be available for the most part. We'll talk more about that. And who will the Dodgers see in the World Series? Are either of these teams better suited to play the Dodgers, or is it just going to feel like the inevitable is going to happen, that the Dodgers will end up being the World Series champion? We'll do that all over the next hour. It's the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli, Andrew Frazier, and of course you hanging out in the chat. And remember to get those mailbag questions in the chat in the next 20 minutes or so. We'll include them into today's show. But let's start today with our Monday morning quarterback segment, which is Monday morning general manager, in fact. And today we're going to turn our attention to Harrison Bader. The interesting part about Harrison Bader is that he's got that $10 million mutual option. Now, usually when options take place for a player, it's either a player option or a club option. Mutual options are somewhat a little bit more rare in the sense that player option means the player can say yes or no. They're going to opt into the deal. Club option means the same for the team, right? So when we think about Jose Alvarado's contract, he has a club option. The Phillies could say, we're going to pick up your, I think it's $9.5 million, or we're not. I believe Matt Strahm also has a club option. I imagine the Phillies will pick up Strahm. I think they're going to pick up Alvarado as well, but that remains to be seen. When a player has a player option, they hold all the chips, and they could just say, yeah, I'm going to opt in. I had a bad year. I'm going to take that guaranteed money, or I'm going to opt out because I had a good year, and I'm going to test free agency, and I'm going to give you a shot, but I'm also going to test the open market. When there's a mutual option, the only way the option kicks in is if both parties, the club and the player, decide that they want to invest in that mutual option. Now, for Harrison Bader, it is a $10 million mutual option for 2026. Here's what I think the reality of the situation is. The Phillies are probably going to exercise their end of the mutual option. I think they would like to have Harrison Bader back, especially on a short-term, 1-year, $10 million deal, where it's kind of a kick-the-can-down-the-road feel, where they're not going to invest long-term just yet, but they would like to see what a full season of Harrison Bader in center field for the Phillies looks like at a fairly team-friendly number. Like $10 million isn't nothing, but in today's Major League Baseball, it's not that much money. So they would love to say, hey, let's pick up this $10 million mutual option, and We'll see what happens in 2026. Harrison Bader, meanwhile, I think is probably the reason that the mutual option is not going to take. I think Harrison Bader is going to decline the $10 million option, assuming he knows that his market value is higher elsewhere. Not elsewhere meaning it's not necessarily in Philadelphia, but elsewhere in the free agent market for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, I think Harrison Bader is going to get more than $10 million per season. Secondly, I think that he's going to get a multi-year deal. I think this is probably the last big extension in Harrison Bader's career. He's 31 right now. He'll be 32 midway through next season. I would expect him to look for probably somewhere in the 3 to 4 year range. I don't know if he gets 4 years, but I would expect him to try to look for a multi-year extension. He might end up settling for 2 for more money, but I think the reality is it's probably going to be in that 3-ish year range on a multi-level extension. And John Peace brings up a good point. I believe you are correct, John Peace. My apologies. I think Matt Strom's kicked in because of, I think it was an innings pitched milestone that he reached this year. It's either an innings pitched or a games appeared in milestone, but I believe you may be correct. Strom's option may have already been picked up. Thank you for that. But that's what an option looked like. I was just giving you an example, but I think you are correct. So with Harrison Bader, I would expect that a multi-year deal is what he and his agent are going to look for. So what is the good of Harrison Bader? What does he do well? Well, I think first and foremost, we know what he does well. He's an exceptional defender. But I think that before we even get into the numbers, and there's his numbers right there, and if you could leave those up, Andrew, we'll talk about them in just a second. He's an exceptional defender. I truly cannot remember the last time I've watched a Phillies center fielder glide to the ball the way that he does, the way that he settles under and makes the play. And it's like, wow, he's backpedaling into a play that probably should not be routine. He's made routine.
The crab walk, as they like to call it.
Yeah, it looks like the crab walk, right? Because he has such a good first step, Andrew. He has such a good break on the ball that he is settling under balls that, like, that's a play that an average defender is making on the run. And he makes not routine plays look routine because he has that ability on that break. So we know he's an elite defender. He was in the 92nd percentile and outs above average this year at a 7, and he's been a 5 or better each of the last 5 seasons. I think back to like Phillies center fielders that had that ability. Andrew, is it fair to say like Ben Revere might have been the last guy that had that glide to him?
Might be fair to say.
I mean, we're talking about 10 plus years ago.
Yep.
You know, and the Phillies have had some okay center fielders. One that I'm not mentioning his name on this podcast anymore, but you know who we're talking about. He was an okay defender. He's a terrible human being.
Yeah.
But he was an okay defender, right? But Harrison Bader has that glide to him. He has that just like smoothness that you can see. So we know he's an elite defender. But here are his numbers, which I think is the good from this season. Since coming over from the Minnesota Twins at the trade deadline, he played 50, and these are all regular season. He played 50 regular season games, had 177 at-bats, hit over 300, had an 824 OPS. He hit 5 home runs, 17 extra base hits is huge. Excuse me. 11 doubles, a triple, and 5 home runs. And he had 12 multi-hit games, including a slew of 3 hit games. Now, that $10 million option at the bottom is kind of the lingering thing. But for Harrison Bader, not only was this an elite 50-game stretch for him as a member of the Phillies, it was basically his best offensive season, period, between his time with the Twins, where he was good, and his time with the Phillies, where he was great. This is by far his best offensive season as a major league player. And Andrew, I appreciate that. Thank you for that graphic there. The other thing that we know, obviously, that he does well, he's a strong base runner. His sprint speed is good. He's in the 85th percentile in sprint speed. Surprisingly, he only had 1 stolen base as a member of the Phillies, but I almost think that was a little bit more by like design than it was him not being a good base runner. I just think the Phillies were looking to like move runners along in that conveyor belt bottom of the order. And there was a lot of times too that there was guys ahead of him or he was, standing on second with nobody out. They weren't trying to, steal third with nobody out when they were trying to get back to the top of the order. So there were factors that were beyond his control as to why he only had 1 stolen base. But as I said, this was to me, the best season of Harrison Bader's career, especially in those numbers as a member of the Phillies. But even in total, Harrison Bader this year had career highs in batting average, 277, on-base percentage, 347, OPS, 749, home runs, 17, RBI, 54, and he also had a career high in hits, doubles, and runs scored. He also had the second best slugging percentage of his career. Only 2021 was better. He had the most barreled balls in his career and the second best barrel rate. So numerically speaking, this was without question Harrison Bader's best season at the dish. He also, when you look at the metrics, was hitting the ball harder than he ever had before. He had a 40.3% hard hit percentage this year, and it's the first time that he ever went over 40% in his major league career. And I think a big reason as to why he was so successful this year was because he hit fastballs at a ridiculous rate. He had his best season ever against fastballs, hitting 319. He also had a 475 slug, and he whiffed on just 19% of the fastballs that he saw this season. Throwing Harrison Bader a fastball in the zone, especially as a member of the Phillies, was a bad decision for opposing pitchers. He was excellent this year in crushing fastballs and driving them and hitting them hard at an exceptional rate. Now, you can look at his Baseball Savant page, and you do see a lot of blue throughout a majority of his page. And so what that tells me is maybe he had a little bit more of a lucky surge than our eyeballs told us. But at some point, much like when we had the conversation about Max Kepler, and it was like, well, Max Kepler's hitting the ball hard and he's getting quote-unquote unlucky. At some point, you're just playing poorly because your stats tell you you're playing poorly. The inverse can also be true. You could say a guy is getting lucky because his expected batting average was 50 points lower than his actual average. His expected slug was about 60 points lower than his actual slug. But at some point, you could say, just like a player's playing poorly because his stats tell you he's playing poorly, a player's playing well because his stats tell you he's playing well. My eyeballs tell me that, sure, your computer numbers can say he's not as good as, or his numbers aren't as good as, his predictive numbers aren't as good as his actual numbers are. Well, Harrison Bader had a good tenure with the Phillies. And so while his expected numbers were down, comp to what he actually performed as, and that's maybe a concern for next season, this year, and for those 50 games, I can tell you with certainty, Harrison Bader was a spark plug for the Phillies. He was a guy the Phillies needed desperately. They plugged him into his lineup, and I said it, and Andrew said it, and Rich Hoffman said it, and VG said it, and we all talked about it at the trade deadline. It felt like an underwhelming move for the Phillies. We all got proven wrong by the fact that he was excellent in his 50 games in the regular season with the team. As we said, 12 multi-hit games in 50 games. That's a really hard number to accomplish. I mean, that's basically over 25% of your, or over 20% of your games, almost 25% of your games, you had a multi-hit game as a member of a team. And so, yes, while his chase rates were not particularly strong, his whiff rates, his strikeout rates, again, not particularly strong, at some point, you just look at him and go, I don't care what his expected numbers say, he's playing well. Much like with Max Kepler, you said, I don't care what his expected numbers say, he wasn't playing well. Now, Kepler ended up turning it around. The question then becomes, what's the unknown for Harrison Bader? The unknown is, can he do it again? The unknown is, does he stay on this path? Because the reality of the situation is, Harrison Bader's back of his baseball card looks a whole lot closer to those expected numbers than what we saw as a member of the Phillies. So, can he stay on that path and have another good year, even if it is maybe a slight downturn from the career year that he had this past season? Or does he revert back to the guy that we've seen for a majority of his career? Because prior to this season, he had a career offensive WAR of 8. Now, you know I'm not a huge WAR fan. It's not my favorite stat in the world, but I think in this case it does tell a story. He had a career offensive WAR of 8 over his first 8 regular seasons, which obviously averages out to it averages out to 1.0 WAR per season. This year, he was at 2.6. He was at 1.4 just in his time as a member of the Phillies. So it tells you 2025 was the best offensive year for Harrison Bader of his career by far. So with that being said, does he command money that looks like the player he was this year, or does he command money that says he overreached and maybe will kind of revert a little bit back to the player that he's been over the course of his career? I think that's really the big question, and I think that's the differentiator between him returning to the Phillies and not, because I do think the Phillies want him back. Dave Dombrowski was pretty effusive of him in his end of season press conference. He spoke how much he was a kind of a shot, an injection of life to the team in the second half. And as Peter Tom Willis points out, I think not having Harrison Bader in your postseason lineup for the last 3 games of the series was detrimental to you. Does Harrison Bader change the outcome of the series? Probably not. But without Harrison Bader, your offense gets objectively worse. Without Harrison Bader, your defense gets objectively worse. And in that series against the Dodgers, you now were down a man because Bader couldn't run because of the groin injury, so he could go up there and hit. But as you saw in the game that he pinch hit and got a base hit, he immediately had to be pinch run for. So you really were down a man because all Bader could do was stand up in the box and hit. Excuse me, I apologize. And with that being said, you were really kind of hamstrung in what you were able to do positionally and what you were able to do with your lineup, because then you had to bump up Brandon Marsh to hit 5th. Then you ended up having one less player that you trusted towards the bottom, middle third and bottom third of your lineup to hit with Bader out of the lineup. It really did hinder their offense. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and say if Harrison Bader's in the lineup, they win that series, because the Dodgers pitching staff was unbelievable. But it did hurt you. There's no question about it. So when we turn our attention to this free agency for Harrison Bader, the question really is, what does he command? And I really don't know the answer to that question. If you go on websites like Spotrac and they tell you what the player market value is, it's an estimate of what that website's computer model thinks that a player is going to get per year in free agency. That number jumps out to be about $14.5 or $15 million per season, which kind of gets you on a path to say Harrison Bader could conceivably sign a deal that's worth somewhere in the range of 3 for $40 to 3 for $45 million. And I wouldn't be stunned if he got 3 for $45. Maybe it's 2 with an option, with that back end being a little bit more expensive type of deal. But I wouldn't be surprised if it is a 3-year deal worth that $40 to $45 million range. So as we did last week, I went and I looked at some of the free agent signings that were similar to what I expect Harrison Bader to get. And when I went and did it, I did it just on outfield comps. And the reality came out to be that Harrison Bader's in a weird spot because there were big-time free agent signings, right? There were the big numerical signings, right? Like Juan Soto, of course. Jung-Hoo Lee got a big deal with the Giants. There were some really legitimate signings, like big-time money signings. And then there were a lot of 1- and 2-year deals. There was the first Teoscar Hernandez deal. There was the Michael Conforto deal this past season. There was the Jurickson Profar deal this past season with the Braves. There really wasn't much of a middle ground to kind of figure out where Harrison Bader might sit. So I found 2 players that signed contracts similar to what I kind of expect Harrison Bader to get. And the one that I wanted to highlight was an interesting one because it's 2 vastly different players, Bader and this guy that I'm about to show you. So let's take a look at the player comp from the contract that I thought was similar-ish. Now, the first thing I'm going to preface this by saying is the numbers that we're showing you for this mystery player were in an injury-riddled season. So this player signed a contract after playing just 57 games that season. So the numbers are going to be skewed. Obviously, the home run numbers are lower. The RBI totals are lower. This player has a significantly less average than Harrison Bader. Bader is almost 30 points higher, 277 to 246. Slugging was fairly similar. Again, this player on the right, I think his slug would have been better if he played the full season. His slug was substantially better than the year prior, or the year prior compared to what you see. Bader's a little bit better, 449 to 429. Bader hit more home runs, but of course played significantly more games, more RBI. That player on the right got a 3-year deal worth $43.5 million. Now, the reason that I say those numbers are skewed and I give you that example was because the year prior, the same guy played 100 more games. He played 157 games and hit 39 home runs and drove in 100 runs scored. He hit 253. The slug was 485. So both of those numbers, well, at least the slug better than Bader's. The home run number sizably better. Now, this player is not the defender that Harrison Bader was. That season had a negative 1.3 WAR defensively, so it's not the same player by any means. But they are both outfielders. And so this was the best comp that I think that I could come up with. And Tyler O'Neill, Molly and Barkley's Life, is an excellent guess. That's the other player that I looked at. It is not Tyler O'Neill, who had an awful year this season. This player had signed in 2023 that we're talking about now. Now, I think when this player was signed in free agency, he went to the San Francisco Giants. And I think what the Giants were hoping for was 39 home runs, 100 RBI player 2 years ago, not the injury-riddled season that they had in 2022. What did this player do in his 1 year in San Francisco? He hit 208, had a slugging percentage of 365, and was not nearly as good as he was the 2 years prior. The year after that, he returned to the team that he initially played with, had a pretty down year that year as well, and was released this spring. That goes to show you the volatility of this type of contract. You could get a player that exceeds all of your expectations. And I'm not sitting here telling you that I think Harrison Bader is going to have that type of drop-off. There was an injury, a groin injury. I don't think it's going to plague him into 2026 the way that this player's 2022 was hampered by injury. But I do think that the question about a return to the norm for Harrison Bader is a fair ask. Now, the question is, who is this player? They're not the same type of player. Bader is faster, a better defender, doesn't have as much pop as obviously a 39 home run season, but I think is probably an all-around more complete player than the guy that I just mentioned. With that being said, this player did drop off pretty quickly. Now, before we get into who that player is, Andrew, I want to ask you this question. Is 3 for 45 a fair number for Harrison Bader? And if it's 3 for 45, do you think the Phillies would be interested in $15 million a season for Bader in center field?
Man. So I've been reading a lot of the comments today in the chat, and one of the things that kind of came across my mind, and something I would be cognizant of, is would Bader hinder any other younger guys coming up?
So specifically Justin Crawford.
Correct.
I think the answer to that question is no. Because I think that Crawford, every indication I got from Dave Dombrowski is that unless he's like terrible in spring training or he gets hurt, he's probably going to make the team out of camp.
Yeah.
And I think that is at Nick Castellanos' expense, not Harrison Bader or Brandon Marsh.
Okay. Then yeah, I think 15 a year is a little steep. I think a little too much. I maybe try to work maybe like
so do you
10
think,
to 12.
Do you think he could get 15 a year from somebody? I know the Yankees have expressed interest to return with him. I think the Tigers have expressed interest.
If their sample size is just his time with the Phillies, I think yes, because he definitely overperformed here.
Sure.
When he was here.
I think overall, like even in his time with the Twins, his time with the Twins were closer to his career numbers.
Yeah.
But it was a good year.
It was a good year, but it really amplified once he came here.
Yes, for sure.
So if they're going to look at this year and specifically that portion of this year, I think he's worth 13 to 15 on a team that could afford that. If the Phillies were to take him, I mean, I would try to stay between 10 and 12.
Here's the crazy number that jumped out to me. Harrison Bader had 70 hits with the Twins in 271 at bats. He had 54 hits with the Phillies in 177. He only had 16 less hits with the Phillies in almost 100 less at bats and over 100 plate appearances.
Yeah.
The numbers that he produced with the Phillies they're crazy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you how I feel at the end of this segment. I'm not expecting Bader to hit that way over a full year with the Phillies or elsewhere again.
Sure.
Like, I think he's made some adjustments. He's become a better hitter than the last time we talked about him, like January of last year even. But I don't expect him to hit 305 over the course of a season. I'm expecting 250.
Yeah.
260.
Yeah.
So the player that I comped,
Yep.
obviously we talked about the 39 home runs. That was the player so he signed with the Giants. That was the player the Giants were hoping they got. Clearly that didn't happen. The injury was a significant injury. I don't think Bader's injury is going to hinder him the way that this player's injury did. But I do think that there is a concern about a regression to the mean.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, the player that we comped is Mitch Haniger, who's a fine player over the course of his career. But I don't think anybody is clamoring for Mitch Haniger outside of that one really, really strong year with the Seattle Mariners. But if the number is about what Haniger got, put to inflation of the baseball calendar year for another, 3 seasons, 3 for 45 compared to 3 for 43.5 isn't that big of a stretch. It's $500,000 a season. I think if you substitute the pop that the Giants hoped that they were getting from Haniger for the defense and base running ability that you know you're going to get from Bader, I think he's going to get somewhere in that $15 million a year range. And with that being said, Andrew, and I apologize, I know we're way over break. We talked for a while. With that being said, I don't think the Phillies are going to give him $15 million a season. I think Harrison Bader was an incredible shot in the arm for the Phillies down the stretch. It was a guy they desperately needed. It was the hero that they needed but didn't know that they deserved, because it's not the guy the guy that showed up in Philadelphia was not the guy we expected him to be. The guy that showed out for the Phillies was not the guy that we expected him to be. He was substantially better than we could have ever expected. But I don't think the Phillies are going to invest a 3, maybe even 4-year deal, probably I would say in the 3-year range for Harrison Bader at that type of price range. If I had to guess, my bet would be that Harrison Bader opts out of the mutual deal and eventually signs elsewhere in free agency. He has said he loved his time here. I think he called it, a treat or a joy or something like that to be traded here. He was thrilled to be a part of a postseason run with the Phillies. Thanked the Twins for sending him to a postseason team. It was an awesome story to see Harrison Bader come to life in his 50 games plus as a member of the Phillies. I think, unfortunately, for a lot of fans, they're going to be bummed when he signs elsewhere on a fairly sizable multi-year extension. Do you think he's back next year? Because I don't.
I don't think so.
I think he's going to end up getting more money than the Phillies are comfortable paying.
I would like him to come back. I think
I would too.
I really liked him a lot.
If I could get an outfield next year of Marsh, Bader, Crawford. Now I need a power hitter somewhere because none of those guys are hitting for power. I especially need a right-handed power bat, which means you're probably looking third base or first base, or probably the 2.
Yeah, because there's
would
2
be
free
my
agents
guess
right now that are power bats that are right-handed.
Sure,
that are first or third.
That outfield defensively would be elite, especially with Marsh in left, because he's a much better left fielder than he is a center fielder. If Crawford could play right, I don't know if he can or not. I don't know. His arm's not particularly strong. He's a great defender. You would know your defense is elite. But I do think Harrison Bader signs elsewhere. All right, let's pause. We're way over break. I apologize for that, Andrew. We're way over the break. On the other side, we'll get into our couple of mailbag questions that we had. If we had any extra in the chat, we'll preview those as well. It's the PHLY Phillies Podcast. We are broadcasting live from the Xfinity Lounge, and we will be right back after this. All right, so the other day you're thinking about hanging out with your buddy. You want to watch some of the AL and NLCS, right? But you head on over there, and the setup is a mess. Lagging, buffering. You got to switch between apps just to keep up with the game. If you call yourself a big fan, do not get fan-fished. Get Xfinity. It's the ultimate sports destination where you can find the best games and your favorite teams all in one place, and the way that you watch becomes next level. It's the perfect fan flex where you get all the action right in your living room. Plus, with 4K enhanced sound and incredible crystal clear optics, it's going to feel like you're at the ballpark anyway. You don't have to hit the road or travel or go watch a game in the ballpark. You can watch it right from your living room. Have all the drinks right in your fridge. All the food is paid for. No parking. There's a lot of benefits to having Xfinity where you get an incredible viewing option. And sometimes you can have 4 games going at once, because why not? You can do it right there from your couch. On top of that, you get real-time notification and live stats right on your TV. So next game day, make sure the big fan in your life isn't a big fail. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Xfinity, imagine that. All right, while we're here, let me tell you about our friends over at Cherry Hill Jeep. If you're looking for a Jeep or Ram truck, there's only one dealership in South Jersey who's been the market leader since 1967. That's our friends over at Cherry Hill Jeep and cherryhilljeep.com. They've got you covered on the best selection, but more importantly, the best prices. How about this? Right now, take advantage of 0% for 60 months on a 2025 Grand Cherokee L 3-row or 0% for 72 months on a 2025 Ram 1500. Slide into a 2025 Jeep Wrangler for as low as $289 a month, and every Wrangler delivers strong drivetrains, innovative engineering, quality components that underpin this icon's legendary heritage. You know about the Wrangler. Now get in one for yourself. Or you can pull away in the most luxurious and functional SUV, the 2025 Jeep Grand Cherokee, also, which includes true zero offers. So stop in today, tell them that PHLY sent you, and receive an additional $1,000 on your trade-in just for mentioning PHLY. I know people buy Jeeps and Rams elsewhere. I just don't know why. Drive home in your new Jeep or Ram today, just minutes from all bridges, or available online 24/7 at cherryhilljeep.com. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Podcast, PHLY Phillies Podcast, excuse me. Hello to everybody in the chat. Elephant in the Room, Stephen Paul, Ray Schumacher, Futz, Peter Tom Willis, RF, John Peace, everybody that's been here. K-Red, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know the offseason still maybe hasn't hit for everybody just yet, but I appreciate you all being here, so thank you so much. All right, we got a couple of mailbag questions. I said I was going to do 3 mailbags this year. The first one was right before the season started. The next one came at the MLB All-Star break, and the final one was at the end of the Phillies season. And so I asked for some questions. I think we had a couple extras in the chat. We'll see how they unfold. But we have a couple that we were able to pull from our friends over in our Discord. And let's get into our mailbag questions for today with the first mailbag question of the day. All right, so this is not a question, but a lineup that was proposed by Philly Dan and Media. And this is Philly Dan and Media's lineup. Leading off, DH, Kyle Schwarber batting second. The shortstop, Trey Turner, batting third. The first baseman, Bryce Harper. No surprise in any of those. But this is where it gets interesting. Luis Robert batting fourth, playing center field. Batting fifth, Kyle Tucker in right. Alec Boehm drops to sixth at third. Bryson Stott, the second baseman, bats seventh. Catcher. Excuse me. Catcher is all that it says, so I'm assuming that means that JT is not back. And then Justin Crawford is in left field, batting ninth. So 1 through 3, that's probably going to be your top 3. I don't know if it's in that order. I think it's probably more towards the order that we saw this year, assuming that Kyle Schwarber is back. So that's the big first step. Is Kyle Schwarber back? I think that the answer to that question, in my opinion right now, is yes. I do think that he is back. But that is based purely on my hopes, really. I think that's really all it comes down to. I don't have a feel for this situation right now. I need to see where kind of reports are coming out of what teams are offering. Obviously, Cincinnati's name gets thrown in the mix a lot. The Cubs have been in the mix a lot. Teams are going to want Kyle Schwarber in their lineup. I think Boston may consider it, like if they're able to move on from Masataka Yoshida and upgrade back to Kyle Schwarber as their left-handed DH, I'm sure that they would take it. There are going to be teams that want Kyle Schwarber, no question about it. What does the number look like for Schwarber? We'll dive more into that as free agency gets closer. But right now, I get the sense that Schwarber will be back. Dave Dombrowski said he's a top priority. He knows it. His representation knows it. And the Phillies know it. And I think that, to me, if you ask me right now, is Kyle Schwarber back? I would say the answer to that question is yes. So the next two are the interesting one, which means let's go to 5 first, and then we'll go back to 4. You're spending big-time money on Kyle Tucker. You're blowing past the luxury tax. Now, I know that means you're not re-signing JT, which is probably about $20 million. You're not re-signing Ranger Suarez, which is somewhere between $20 and $25 million, maybe even a little bit more, because it just says catcher, right? So it's going to be a journeyman type of catcher paired with Rafael Marchand, and they're going to figure it out for the next season. But you're paying Kyle Tucker probably close to, if not $40 million a season. You're also extremely left-handed heavy, which is not a problem if you balance it with your proposed Luis Robert in center field, batting 4th. He's your right-handed power bat. So he has a club option, I believe, for $20 million with the White Sox. My guess is they're going to pick it up. They did not trade him this trade deadline. They did not trade him last trade deadline. My guess is that the White Sox will pick up the club option for $20 million. And I imagine they probably will do that. Do they trade him this offseason? Well, he's been a talking point now for 2 seasons. 2 years ago, the return for Luis Robert would have been the sun, the moon, and the stars. Last trade deadline, it would have been less. Now, it's probably even less. And I don't know what a trade package for Luis Robert would look like. This seems to me as if Philly Dan and media is hoping for a buy low scenario. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case. I think it's probably going to be still a fairly, I don't want to say sizable, but fairly decent return, just because of the power bat being what it is. Like the hope would be, hey man, if he turns it around, he's going to be a legit player. You know his numbers against lefties are off the charts. The problem is his numbers as a whole were down across the board. So you're spending the big money in free agency on Kyle Tucker. You're making a trade for Luis Robert, and then your catcher is probably going to be some journeyman, veteran guy who probably doesn't provide you a ton. That lineup is super intriguing. I don't know how realistic it is. I do think the Phillies will make some sort of a play in free agency. With that being said, if they're going to give Kyle Schwarber $40 million or close to it, maybe 30 in the 30-ish range, are they also going to offer big-time money to another free agent? Because if they are, what that says is John Middleton said, screw it, we're going way over the luxury tax, and we're spending $45 million over that number, and we just don't care anymore. Because here's the thing. If the Phillies are going to spend over the luxury tax, it can't be let me rephrase that. They're already over the luxury tax. Over the next threshold, which is an even bigger penalty and a draft pick penalty. If they're going to spend over that money, it can't be $5 or $7 or $8 million over. It's got to be like, if you're going to do it, go do it. Go spend $30 million over. Go spend big-time serious money and just go make it happen. Because at that point, you're already paying significant tax money over the threshold anyway. If you're going to spend that kind of money, you got to go spend the money. So if they're going to do it, they're going to go for broke. I don't know if they will. I don't think they have infinite budget. And I think based on John Middleton's comments, Dave Dombrowski's comments last week, that the payroll is going to look similar to what it did last year. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to go to the same exact players, but if it looks similar and you're paying Schwarber, even if you're not paying Real Muto and Ranger, I don't know how much more money you have in terms of big-time free agent spending. If that's the lineup, you got better. No question about it. You got a righty power bat who, at his best, is a legit power threat. The question is, can he ever get back to his best again? And then you've got the legit lefty at the bottom after that in Kyle Tucker, which would make your top 5 just unbelievable. All right, let's get to the next question here in our mailbag. The real Rick. The real Rick. You think that's on purpose?
The real Rick.
Yeah, it's like the man, the myth, the legend type of thing.
Yeah.
Says, what will be the biggest move the Phillies make that isn't one of our own coming back, position or player? Well, this kind of goes in tandem with what I was just talking about with how much money they're willing to spend. So I think there are 4 names outside of the Phillies pending free agents that Phillies fans will keep an eye on. The first obviously, is going to be Alex Bregman, the right-handed power hitting third baseman. I think they're going to do I think they did their due diligence on him last offseason. I think it was just a monetary restriction that kept them from signing him last offseason. And I think they're going to do their due diligence on him this offseason. He's going to be 32. His numbers have gone somewhat in the wrong direction over the last couple of seasons prior to this past year. Now, you think about the year that he put together this past season in 2025. It was a pretty good year. I'll give you the numbers in just a moment. He hit 273, slugged 460, hit 18 home runs, which was, I think the power numbers are starting or have already kind of started to trend in the wrong direction for him. Still a fairly good defender, in the 83rd percentile in range, right? But the things that he does well, he doesn't chase, he doesn't whiff, he doesn't strike out. Those numbers are always fairly high. At least this past year it was, and for the last couple of seasons, he's been in the 90th percentile or better in almost all of those numbers. So you know the things that he does well. The question is, how much money is he going to get? I think it's going to be a lot. I think he's going to get a pretty large deal. I think he's going back to Boston. I think he opted out of that deal to get a long-term deal, and I do believe he ends up back in Boston on a restructured contract. Kind of like what Blake Snell did last year with the Dodgers, where he signs the short deal and then he signs the big extension. But I think that Bregman ends up back in Boston. But I think that that's probably the obvious first name to think about. Then there's a couple of other guys that I would be interested to see how they feel about them. The first one is Bo Bichette. Now, the first thing that we need to talk about with Bo Bichette is he a shortstop? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm really struggling here. Is he a shortstop or is he not? I don't think he's a defensive shortstop much longer. His defensive metrics have gone in the wrong direction each of the last couple years. It was a really nice bounce back year for him offensively. 2 years ago, he really struggled with the bat. Really unlucky hitter, but also just struggled in his own right. This past year was a much better return to form. He led the American League in hits. In fact, he may have led all of baseball in hits, but I know he led the American League in hits. A much better year for Bo Bichette. The question is, are teams going to sign him as a shortstop, or is he going to move somewhere else? Now, I don't think that means a move to second would facilitate a Phillies deal, but a move to third would be interesting. Can he play third base at an adequate level because the bat is good? Doesn't have a ton of pop, but you know what he does well as well. He's got really, really good bat-to-ball skills. As I said, he led the American League in hits this season. Has consistently been a near 300 hitter over his career, with the exception of last season. He hits the ball hard. He doesn't whiff a lot. His chase rates aren't good. He does chase quite a bit, but he doesn't whiff a lot. He doesn't strike out a lot. So if you can feel comfortable with a guy like that moving to third base, that's an intriguing thought in and of itself. Now, I don't know if A, he wants to sign somewhere where he's not going to be a shortstop, and B, if he's not going to get a massive long-term deal. I do think he probably ends up elsewhere, but Bo Bichette is an interesting one as well. The last guy, and this changes the complexity of everything, and I know Dave Dombrowski said that he expects Bryce Harper to be a first baseman. The last guy, obviously, is Pete Alonso. I don't see that move happening. I don't think that he's going to end up signing in Philly. I think he signs a massive extension in New York, quite frankly, to stay with the Mets. But if he doesn't, I think he's going to get a big deal no matter where he goes. I just don't think that that's going to be a play. But Pete Alonso obviously is somebody that people are going to clamor to quite a bit. One player really quickly before we move on to the next question that I would be interested to see how the Phillies react to this guy is Eugenio Suarez, because he was tied to the Phillies all trade deadline. The Phillies didn't want to give up what they thought they had to in order to sign to acquire a half-a-year rental. Now that he's going to be a free agent this offseason, I would be interested to see if maybe the Phillies come back into play if they're able to move off of Alec Bohm. All right, let's pause. On the other side, we'll get to some of the final mailbag question. We'll talk a little bit more about the ALCS and NLCS as the Dodgers await their AL opponent in the World Series. We'll do it all on the PHLY Phillies podcast, and we'll be right back after this. All right, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary with Bet365. Find out why 90 million users worldwide have teamed up with Bet365, and you can live in-game bet across 78 different sports and live stream 780,000 different events each and every year. They are the pioneers of live in-game betting. Lines change all the time, and you can get up on the latest odds and trends with our friends over at Bet365. And how about this? Right now, new users sign up, use the promo code PHLY365, deposit $10, place a bet for $5, and you'll get $200 back in bonus bets, whether that bet wins or loses. You can use your bonus bet money on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and so much more, and you find out why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 and physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, if you're thinking about heading down to the complex for a sporting event or a comedy or a concert or a theater event, there's no better place to get those tickets than with our friends over at Game Time, because the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences with just a few taps. It's unbelievably easy to use, and the Game Time guarantee means that you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. And if you find a price that's better than the Game Time price, they will credit you 110% of the difference. You can use the 3D seat map to see exactly where your seats are going to be. No obstructed views. No sitting sideways trying to maneuver an old ballpark. No sitting behind a foul pole or a sign or whatever it might be. You're going to know exactly where you sit and where you are before you buy those tickets. And with just one swipe, you can see all of your fees up front. You don't have to worry about late last-second fees jumping in and adding to your price. You're going to know exactly what you pay before you go to checkout. So download the Game Time app today. Use the promo code PHLY, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Once again, create an account, redeem the code PHLY for $20 off. Tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli, Andrew Frazier, and everybody hanging out in the chat with us. Thank you so much for being here on this off-season episode of the PHLY Phillies Podcast. All right, let's get to our final mailbag question before we get into the ALCS conversation. I have an interesting stat from Sarah Langs that is maybe concerning for the Dodgers. We'll talk more about it in just a little bit, but let's get to that final mailbag question that was brought to us by JC Heim 90. 2 questions. All right, first one is a life question. Second one is a Phillies question. Let's do the Phillies question first, and then we'll get to that first question. Question is, as a Phillies host/fan, would you be open to trading Luzardo if it upgrades the lineup and you can keep Ranger? So I know that this was proposed by Hembo on ESPN, great statistician for ESPN. Hembo came with a lot of interesting takes and a lot of stats and money to back up this question, but I disagree with him here. I think that Luzardo's upside is higher than Ranger. And we've talked very, very strongly about Ranger Suarez. He's one of my favorite players, one of my favorite pitchers I've watched in a Phillies uniform. With that being said, Luzardo is still controllable for this year with his final year of arbitration, and you still have basically 12 months to figure out a long-term extension with Jesus Luzardo. Now, would I offer less than market value to Luzardo in an extension right now? I would, yeah, because you still have that time in your back pocket. But that being said, I do think that their best course of action is to, if it's one or the other, Luzardo or Ranger, I think letting Ranger walk in free agency and figuring out the extension with Luzardo is probably the play that they're going to do. So no, I would not trade Luzardo. I think Ranger is going to walk in free agency, and I think Luzardo will be getting a long-term contract offer sooner rather than later. And then Andrew, if you can bring that question back up. Second question: as a new parent, what opinion do you have as a parent that non-parents would disagree with? Interesting question. I think the answer to this question is something that I didn't really realize until I was a parent. And The answer to this question is my kid has a right to be places too. And what I mean by that is the big example that I use on this one, Andrew, is like the baby on the plane question. Like the people bring up like, oh, why are you bringing a crying baby on a plane? And, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, if I'm traveling, I'm not leaving my child at home, right? This isn't Home Alone, and I have a baby. And I'll be honest with you, my kid has been great. We've taken him on 2 flights now. He's been great on flights. I don't know if that lasts forever, but if I have to travel somewhere, especially like if we're going to see family, like I have family in Florida, I'm going to go see them. The only way we can get to them is to fly. Like I can't drive 15 hours with a 1-year-old. That sounds even worse than flying with a 1-year-old. So I think the one take that a lot of people without kids, and I felt this way for a while until I had kids and realized there's no option, right? The one take that I think people without kids have that I disagree with is like my child has a right to be on that plane too. I will do everything in my power to make sure it is as smooth and as seamless of a flight as possible. And I apologize in advance if my 1-year-old is a 1-year-old, meaning like he might cry. He might, throw toys or whatever. I might poop his pants on the plane. And that sounds grotesque, but I have a baby, right? Like it might happen. I'm going to do everything I can to limit the problems. But I think that as a parent now, I have changed my mindset on like my kid has a right to be places too. And I have the responsibility to make sure he's as well behaved as possible. But you also have to understand he's a baby. And then Futz brings up the other one is like the screen time thing, right? Before I had kids, it was like, no screen time, like limited screen time, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes after a day of work and your kid's a mess, sometimes you just got to put Miss Rachel on and let them zone out for half an hour or an hour. Like the screen time thing changes drastically after you have kids. So I think those are my 2 big takes. I apologize about this cough thing. I've been trying to deal with it for a week now. It's been miserable. All right, let's hit our last break. On the other side, we're going to get into the ALCS conversation. And Andrew, I have an interesting stat that maybe doesn't benefit the Dodgers. We'll talk more about it on the other side. It's the PHLY Phillies Podcast. We are broadcasting live from the Xfinity Lounge, and we'll be right back after this. All right, listen, you know that feeling, right? You walk into a jewelry store and you're thinking about trying to pick out that special piece for your special someone. And all of a sudden, you're in over your head. You're thinking, what's the difference between all these diamonds? What is clarity? What is cut? What does cushion mean? What are the different types of styles? And what, at the end of the day, if my special person doesn't like what I buy? It can be stressful. I went through it. Luckily for me, my wife basically said, here's the exact type of ring I would like. You pick out what works in your budget. Made things very easy for me. But if you're feeling that stressful feel, that's why working with Joe and Michelle at Bucci Jewelry and Design is such a game changer. They make the whole process seamless. From the minute that you walk in, you're going to feel like your family. They listen to you. They help you figure out exactly what your special person loves, right? And then their team designs something completely custom right there in-house. So there's no pressure, no pushy sales vibes. It's just good people who love what they do and want to make sure your end result is something that you're proud of and something that your partner is proud of. So next time you need the perfect piece, go see Joe and Michelle at Bucci's Jewelry and Design. 30 plus years in the game, voted Philly's #1 jeweler year after year. And over 1,000 5-star reviews speak for themselves. So check them out today at BucciJewelers.com and tell them the guys at PHLY sent you. All right, listen, I know that it's fall, right? It's a little bit more crisp air. It's not 95 degrees anymore, right? We're thinking about bonfires, football games, outdoor events, right? You're thinking about jumping in the leaf pile with your kids, or you're going to the pumpkin patch or whatever it might be. I know that it's a little cooler, but that doesn't mean that you're done working. That doesn't mean that you're not sweating. You know that feeling, right? You've been thinking about a hard day of work. You come home, you don't smell too great. Let's be honest. Regular deodorant just doesn't cut it. So that's where the real game changer comes into play. Mando deodorant plus sweat control. It's not just another cover-up. It's one stick that does 2 jobs. Powerful odor protection and sweat control. It stops odor before it starts. No more masking, just freshness. Clinical strength sweat control with one swipe and you're good to go for up to 72 hours. Double protection for both odor and sweat. And how about this? If you're thinking about it, you want to dip your toe in the Mando waters, the starter pack is the perfect play for you. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, plus free shipping. And as a special offer for listeners, new customers right now get 20% off site-wide with an exclusive promo code. So use the code PHLY at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli, Andrew Frazier, and you hanging out in the chat. Thanks so much for being here. All right, Andrew, I said I had an interesting stat for you. This came from Sarah Langs, who is one of the best in the business. And Sarah pointed out that this is the 5th time that one championship series was a sweep and the other was a 7-game series. It happened in 1988, 2006, 2007, and 2012. Now, the teams that went on to win in a sweep. In 1988, the A's beat the Red Sox in a sweep. In 2006, the Tigers over the A's. 2007, the Rockies over the Diamondbacks. And 2012, the Tigers over the Yankees. The other series, the Giants over the Cardinals in 7, the Red Sox over Cleveland in 7, the Cardinals over the Mets in 7, and the Dodgers over the Mets in 7 in 1988. Do you know what all of the teams that went on to sweep their championship series did in the World Series against the team that played 7 games? Every team that swept their series lost the World Series.
Whoa.
Every single one. The Dodgers went on to win 4, and not only did they lose the series, none of the series went past 5 games.
Man.
The 88 Dodgers won in 5, the 06 Cardinals won in 5, the 07 Red Sox won in a sweep, and the 2012 Giants won in a sweep.
Man. Huh.
I think the Dodgers may buck that trend.
I'm going to say the same thing. I think
not only do I think the Dodgers buck that trend, but I think the Dodgers are going to win the World Series. Been saying that for a while.
Yeah. I think that's clear.
Because here's the thing. The 07 Rockies specifically, John Peace points them out, right?
Yeah.
They won, they win 27 of their final 30 games or whatever it was to get into the playoffs, swept out the Phillies, swept out the Diamondbacks, and then they just sat. And that team had some really good players. Future Hall of Famer Todd Helton, Matt Holliday was on that team, Troy Tulowitzki was on that team. They had some very good players. But their pitching staff was pitching over its head. Jeff Francis, Aaron Cook, they weren't that good. Their offense had a bunch of dudes who came together all at the right time. Ryan Spilborghs and Yorvi Torrealba. And listen, I'm not going to take anything away from that team. It was an unbelievable run to push to a 163, win that game, sweep out the Phillies, sweep out the Diamondbacks, and then they just sat around. The overarching theme here is the team that waited on the best of 7 series to complete more times than not ended up getting rusty. I don't see that scenario happening with the Dodgers. Their pitching is just too good. Their pitching has been so good this postseason. I don't think the extra couple of days of sitting around are going to be all that problematic. And so it's an interesting stat, but I don't think it changes my thought on the Dodgers' approach to the World Series. Real quick before we get out of here, K-Red says, just turned 40 and his son is turning 18 next month. Feels surreal. So K-Red and every parent that's in the chat, let me ask you a question. My kid's about to turn 1. What am I supposed to be feeling right now? Because it's weird. It's like everybody that said to me, oh man, the days are going to be long, but the months and the years are going to fly by. It's going to go by in the blink of an eye, and you're going to look up and they're going to be in grade school and high school and college, and then they're going to get married and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but what happens at 4 a.m. for the last 12 months of the year when I'm up every night at 2 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning? And then a year got on me in seconds. Yeah, I'm definitely tired. There's no question about it, Provolone John. I'm not, but I will say this. He has settled into a nice little routine over the last 2 weeks. He slept really nice. And we've been really lucky. He's been about as easy Relatively speaking, he's been about as easy as we possibly could ask for. But he's about to turn 1, and I'm like, I looked at him this morning. We were sitting on our bed, right? On my bed, and he looked up at me, and he gave me this like 2-tooth grin. It's the cutest thing in the world, right? But I looked at him and I went, "Who the hell are you?" Because he immediately was like, he looked like he was, a grown man. I'm like, where's my baby? Where's the little kid we brought home from the hospital? Because he's going to be 1 next week, and I'm like, I'm not sure how to process it yet. And I know everybody says it just gets longer and or shorter and shorter and shorter, and the years go by in the blink of an eye. If they went by as quick as the first year did, I get your point. I totally get your point. Big thanks to everybody in the chat for hanging out with us today. We'll be back on Wednesday afternoon for another edition of Remember Me. We'll have more conversations surrounding the Phillies offseason, and we'll do it all on the PHLY Phillies podcast. So everybody in the chat, Futz, Ray Schumacher, K-Red, Ed Wright, Provolone John, everybody that was there, I thank you. Or if I didn't mention you, thank you so much for being here. If I did mention you, thank you so much for being here. And Bill Matt's in the chat because Philadelphia is coming up at 1:30. JC Heim, appreciate you. Thanks for your mailbag questions today. I appreciate that. And we'll be back on Wednesday. Huge thank you to Andrew Frazier for producing and co-hosting today's show. Philadelphia coming your way next at 1:30, followed up by the PHLY Eagles podcast at 2. PHLY Sixers are at 3. And then pre and post game for the Flyers tonight as the Flyers get set for a Monday night puck drop. We'll do it all here on the PHLY Phillies podcast and the PHLY network. We'll be back on Wednesday at noon right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast. We'll talk to you then. See you.
We all silly like the mayor.